Hey everybody. So I am back today because unfortunately, yesterday, David Lynch passed away. And I don't normally make videos like this very often. It's always really weird when we talk about, our consumption of art and our relationship to artists because, some of the artists that impact you the most in your life, typically you don't get to meet them. You don't get to have conversations with them. You don't get to understand how their brain works. And normally, celebrity deaths, like if there's someone that I really respect or care about, they can hurt, but it's like you have that distance. You don't really know them as people, so you could be upset about it. But something about when the news was announced for David passing away, it really got to me a lot, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that David's movies and just his personality and everything about him and learning more about him over the years fundamentally changed the way that I think about what movies are and art as a whole and how to approach art in general. And I truly wholeheartedly believe deep down that David Lynch was a one of a kind artist. I don't think there will ever be anyone like him again. There are a lot of people that go on and on about like work feeling Lynchian, and there's definitely people that have attempted to do what David does, but there's no one that's ever really been able to replicate his style in a way that feels so uniquely him. And I just thought I would come on here today, not really to do anything particular, but just to talk about his work and how it has impacted me and why I think he's such an incredibly important artist. And that if you've ever been on the fence about watching any of his movies, that I truly think now is a great time to go back through and visit his catalog. Because one of the things I love about David is if you look at his work from Eraserhead all the way through Inland Empire, which was his last feature length film, and then even the third season of Twin Peaks. What makes David's work so incredibly special is that he tackles a wide variety of genres and subject matter, and he dives into surrealism and abstract elements of filmmaking, but he also makes films that are incredibly grounded in reality and beautiful, like The Straight Story. And that's what I love so much about David, because when I think about his work, like you want to put two movies that feel like they're opposites, you could take The Straight Story and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. And The Straight Story is a movie about a man who is getting older and he lives with his disabled daughter, and the two of them spend all their time together. And he finds out that his estranged brother, who has gotten incredibly ill, and he decides to travel across the country to go see him again. But he can't drive a car. He doesn't want anyone else to take him, so he gets on a lawnmower and drives several states away to go see his brother. And then you have Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is a story about a young woman who is being horribly and brutally abused in the most awful way imaginable, and is the most popular girl in her school. And she has to put on a front as to who she is, and she has to act like everything is okay while simultaneously shutting out all of her pain. And what I think is so interesting about looking at those two stories is a lot of people will watch Twin Peaks and say, oh, it's super strange and weird and abstract. And sure, it's all of those things. But similar to The Straight Story, it is a beautiful human story studying someone to their deepest, most fundamental core. And that's what I love about David Lynch is he can do very abstract pieces of film, but he can do them in a way that captures the human experience, that it just feels so authentic and real that it's hard to put into words. I remember the first time I watched Eraserhead, and you hear a lot about Eraserhead and just like what it is to people and people that just can't seem to grasp or understand it. And the thing that I find so brilliant about Eraserhead is every time I watch that movie, I get something completely different out of it. Because clearly, at the most surface level, it's a father who was thrown into fatherhood that didn't want to be one. And so it's the struggle of him dealing with that, and what representation you take away from all the other characters that are introduced, or the symbolism that David puts on screen in those moments. That's completely and totally up to you. But what I love about it is it's an experience. It's something that will move you to your very core, which is what I love so much about David's entire filmography, is that whenever I watch one of his movies, it doesn't just feel like I've watched a movie. It feels like it's fundamentally shifted me in one way or another, or it makes me think about the world in a very different context. It's what I love so much about watching Inland Empire for the first time. Inland Empire isn't even my favorite of David's work, but it's a culmination of a ton of ideas that he had. And I just find myself constantly picking apart each and every individual element of that movie and replaying it in my head as to how it all ties together and to what it all means. And that's what makes David so incredible as an artist. I loved in discovering his work throughout my years and reading about him and learning about his music career and just how strange and surreal a lot of the music that he makes is, but just how thoughtful and beautiful a lot of it is. And his actual artwork that he makes and the pieces of art that he creates, there's just something so completely and wholly authentic about him as an individual. And it's what made me love him so much. I love watching interviews with David and hearing him discuss just the human experience and the way that he perceives people. One of my favorite things that I've ever taken away from David as an artist is when he was confronted about explaining what movies that he makes mean to him, and like the meaning behind Eraserhead or the meaning behind Inland Empire. And I'm going to paraphrase him here. This isn't an exact quote, but he essentially says that when I make a movie and I shoot it and I bring it to screen, it means something to me in that moment. It has a definitive and complete purpose to me in my mind. But as soon as it's handed off to the audience, I care more about what it means to them than what it means to me. And I think that there's something so incredibly special about that, because an artist goes into a project with a vision. They understand, like, okay, this is a reflection of something that's happened to me in my life, or things that have happened around me, the state of the world, whatever it may be, that is the reason an artist tackles a specific subject. But at the end of the day, when that piece of art is handed to you, it impacts you in a very personal and real and raw way. And that's what David's work has done for me, specifically, is watching him over the years. I've just taken away so much about, whether it be his thoughts on meditation or his thoughts on just empathy towards human beings, compassion towards people, the beauty in pursuing art, just not letting the little things get in the way, optimism for the future. There's so much about David, especially in these weather reports that he was doing the past several years, that just kind of showcase what a truly remarkable and special human being that he is. Last year or the year before, I listened to the audiobook version of his book Room to Dream, which, if you're interested in David Lynch at all, I would 100% recommend you check out. And honestly, the audiobook is really the way to go, because David actually does narrate a lot of it, and it's someone kind of recapping the experience of his life and then him telling the story from his own perspective. And it just really brought a lot of insight into where he came from and what kind of fascinated him with the depraved and the disturbed elements of the world. Because when you think about Blue Velvet really kind of encapsulates his whole life growing up, as like he grew up in these small Midwest towns, but was always interested in the more darker underbelly of it all, and what happens when things go wrong and when everyone perceives something a very specific way, but there's something much more sinister going on underneath the surface. And that's what I truly love so much about David as an artist, is just the way that he looked at the world in such a very real, raw, and visceral way. And this one really hurt a lot. I just, when it first hit and was announced, it really just kind of shook me up to my core. I cried quite a bit about it, which was strange because it's like I said, I've never met David before. I don't know him personally. I never knew him as an individual, but when someone's art impacts you to that level and feels like that they've just been able to help you kind of shape the way you perceive art in the world, it's really tragic and it's horrible. And I know the loss of David has impacted a lot of people, and I know that there are a lot of movie lovers and film lovers that just appreciate him for who he is, and really are going to miss him a lot. And I'm sad that we'll never see a new David Lynch project, and I'm sad that he isn't ever going to be able to make anything else, because he truly brought a lot of light and joy into this world, especially to this guy who has lived a life that has a lot of depression and dour moments, and I've been through a lot of tragedy, and his work has provided me a lot of solace and joy in some of the most difficult periods in my life. And I just just wanted to take a minute to reflect on his life today, and I appreciate you listening to me talk about it. And I'm sure there's a lot of you out there who are watching this video who are equally as saddened by David, but the one takeaway that we can have is the impact that his work has had on each and every one of us, and what a special human being that he was. And David, we're all going to miss you.
Every film, I think, is, as I said, going into a new world, going into the unknown. But you should be not afraid of using your intuition and think your way through, have the experience, and trust your inner knowing of what it is.